Hey, it's Matt Pinfield. It's KLOS New and Approved. I'm here with the incredible Billy Gibbons, a guy that I've been a huge fan of since the time I was a young kid. I discovered ZZ Top, and I've been a fan my entire life. I love his playing, I love his personality, and his incredible journey that he's been on all these years, and still rocking as hard as ever. And it's just great to have you here, Billy. It's good to see you again.
Mr. Matt, thanks for that great build-up. I've been, since we're talking about friends, fans, and followers, here we are, and we get to talk about what we really enjoy.
Yeah, which is music more than anything in the world.
Making loud noise. That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Absolutely. You got this most recent record out, your new album, which is so cool. It's ZZ Top Raw, and I want to talk about this because it's got a real cross section of songs going back to the first album, things like Brown Sugar back in 1971, all the way up and throughout the years, Legs and things like that. There's so much great music to choose from, but I want to talk to you about how you guys ended up doing this record because I know it was based around the Netflix documentary, which was so good, by the way. That little old band from Texas,
Oh, yeah.
which I watched a few times because I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. But it was just there's so much heart in it, and it was such a great story. Talk to me about how this album came about because it was started there, right?
Yeah, once the project got underway, it was rolling pretty good. And the director had this idea to bring the band together, and he wanted to position us for a photograph. He said, "Listen, I'd like to find maybe a juke joint or a honky tonk, some place that would represent the image of where you guys started." And I said, "Well, okay, you work on that." And he finally called back, and he found this place between San Antonio and Austin, Green Hall, which I was very familiar with. I said, "Yeah, you know what? That's a good setting." And upon arrival, there was more than just a camera. He had our crew had set up the stage with all of the gear. The wires had gotten crossed. They thought it was a proper gig, so they had set up the gear, and we were all kind of scratching our heads, going, "Gee, I thought this was a snapshot. This was really going deep." And he said, "Well, since the gear is here, my guys are out in the back. If you don't mind, I'll bring the cameras in. Maybe we can get some footage of you guys." Well, Frank and Dusty were getting a little antsy, and I said, "Gee whiz," I said, grab the guitars and grab them drumsticks. We'll get behind the backbeat." And what we thought was going to be maybe 5 or 10 minutes turned out to be 2 hours of waiting and waiting. But we were not waiting. We were going back and digging deep, playing things. Little did we know that the recording machine was taking it all in. And I guess it was, maybe uh, uh, 2 years had gone by, and the engineers called me up and they said, "By the way, what do you want me to do with these tapes?" And I said, "What tapes are you talking about?" He said, "Well, the tapes that we recorded as you guys were jam sessioning at Green Hall." And I said, "You mean you recorded that?" And he said, "Yeah." So we put it together, and lo and behold, it sounded pretty good. It was just about as authentic as an early example of what ZZ Top was doing when we first started, all the way up until more recent times. A lot
That's
of fun.
amazing, and it sounds so good, and it kicks off with Brown Sugar from the very first album, and yeah, it just has that really live, authentic feel, that great feel of a band, guys all playing together, looking at each other in a room, and getting that feeling from playing live, from just hearing the music and making it, which I think is really cool. How was the experience of making the documentary? Because I love that doc, and I know that your fans did, and it was something we needed when it came out during the pandemic and became available right then and on Netflix because we need something to bring us our spirits up and that was a great one. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, earlier we even spoke about bragging on the director, and I pulled him aside and I said, "Look," I said, "seems like things are going pretty good. We got the wheels turning, and but by the way," I said, "tell me how you're going to handle the ending." I said, documentary, it's a story. Stories have an ending. And I said, by the way, ZZ Top is still going. There hasn't been an ending. He said, oh, I get it. And to that, I give him credit for rolling us through and, letting the band keep on going.
Yeah.
That was the good piece to it all.
Yeah, to ending it, which was really cool. I got to go back, Billy, in time. To you, being born in that Houston, Texas area, and how cool it was that your mom took you and your sister to see Elvis at 5 years old.
Wow.
What was? I mean, because that's got to be incredible. Talk to me about that first live experience and it being the king.
Yeah, Elvis was breaking out, and Texas happened to be one of the big strongholds for those early days when Elvis was getting his feet on the ground, and the explosion was percolating. And I remember it was at the Sam Houston Coliseum, big place, and seeing Elvis come alive. I remember I was looking up there and saying, "Yeah, I can see doing that."
Yeah.
I can see doing that.
Yeah.
It was a great start, and it was the impetus that kept me going. And that was mid '50s, and at the same time, maybe a year and a half later, I remember my dad called me in, and he said, by the way, I've got business across town at the recording studio with Bill Holford over at ACA. You want to go? And I said, yeah. I think I was 7 at the time. And we arrived, and we're walking in, and he said, now look, I'm going to put you in that chair here in the studio. I want you to sit there because there's a band coming in to make a record. And by this time, I knew what that was kind of all about, and I got very excited to be in the room where a record was going to be made. He said, listen, if you need me, I'll be in the office, but just sit here, and he said, I think you'll enjoy it. Well, lo and behold, the band arrived. It was none other than B.B. King.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Like, okay, Elvis, B.B., I'm in.
Yeah. That changed everything. And at a very young age, I know, when you got your first guitar, and it's just let's talk about that too, because who were the people at that point that you were listening to, before you started forming bands, like the Moving Sidewalks, who were the great band you formed out of Texas, Rocky Erickson and some of your friends from that area, and right after that came people like the Bubble Puppy. There was all kinds of bands from that area of Texas, right?
Well, we grew up in a household. My dad, of course,
he was an orchestra leader, music guy all the way around, right?
Oh yeah, we had music from all sides, but it was our housekeeper that tuned into the local R&B radio station, which is what my younger sister and I gravitated toward, much more so than kind of the legitimate stuff my dad was delivering. So from those interesting elements as being so influential, we went that direction. And 3 nights a week, we actually got to stay with the housekeeper. My dad was playing downtown Houston, and we'd get dropped off. We get to 3 nights a week on a good week.
Yeah.
We got to stay with Big Stella.
Yeah.
She had a daughter, Little Stella, and then there was Minnie, Dorothy, and Johnny. So it was a fun little household. Well, as a housekeeper, Big Stella was tuckered out by the end of the day. So by 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, she was ready to turn it in. But Little Stella was ready to go out. And I remember she would pick up my little sister, and I'd grab her by the hand, and we'd walk down 2 blocks. This was in 4th Ward, down on the corner of Taft and West Gray. There was a joint, and all of the great R&B and blues players came through town.
Wow. Who was there? Who were
We
some
saw
of them?
Jimmy Reed. We saw Howlin' Wolf.
Wow.
Lightning Hopkins was a cornerstone.
Yeah.
All of this was again part and parcel to what became I call it the kind of the cornerstone of
Yeah.
which we were able to pursue.
Yeah.
It was good stuff.
Certainly did that for ZZ Top. And there was a period. You got to travel, and you became worldly, which now you've of course been everywhere. But talk to me about going to school. You went to like our school, Warner Brothers Art School. You came out to L.A. when you were really young too, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I'll have to go back. My dad, the English dad, his dad was a glove maker. And when they came over, they landed in upstate New York at a town, believe it or not, called Gloversville,
Yeah.
where they made gloves. And
Yeah.
one day I asked my dad how he got into the entertainment game. He said, my 5 brothers and I went down to the glove factory to have lunch with our dad. And it was on the way home, all of us looked at each other and said, we need to think of something quick because we're not doing that.
Yeah.
And they all decided to pick up an instrument. They got pretty good at it. They had a small combo called the Jazzy 5.
Yeah.
And they were so talented, and when I say they got good, they climbed up the ladder, and later they went from the Jazzy 5 to the Gibbons Brothers Band, which was Tuxedo Orchestra, the whole bit.
Yeah.
And at the time, we're talking about the 20s, late 20s and early 30s, there was a guy working at the glove factory. He was from Poland. He's an immigrant from Poland. And he went by the name Samuel Goldfish. And one day he came to my dad. He said, Freddie, he said, we're going to California. We're getting into the motion picture business. And Samuel Goldfish changed his name to Samuel Goldwyn. Started a little company called Metro Goldwyn.
MGM. Yeah, exactly.
So it brought my dad to California way back in. And now, keep in mind at that particular juncture, to have a kind of a fancy vacation in the summertime, you went to upstate New York, Lake George, Saratoga Springs, Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
I mean, south of San Antonio was a dirt road to Mexico. West of El Paso was cowboy and Indian wars. So you went upstate New York, and there was a guy working for the Lowe's Corporation. This is before the Warren Hayes Act broke up a Warner Brothers picture had to be shown in a Warner's house. The Lowe's pictures was shown in the Lowe's house. And there was a guy, Will Horowitz, was dispatched from New York to come down to Houston to build 3 grand movie houses. And he had a daughter, so he would dispatch her back to New York in the summertime. Well, she fell for my dad, and next thing you know, they got married, and that brought him to California. So from an early point, I couldn't figure out where we were living. Was it Las Vegas, Nevada? Was it Los Angeles, California? Was it Houston? And then my dad's first wife became very ill. And when the handwriting was on the wall, she said, I want to go back to Houston to be with my dad. So my dad said, fine. And the good news is after her passing, he met my mom. And my sister and I were fortunate enough to be brought up as Texans, And but we were coming back to California, and then you threw Las Vegas in the mix. There was all kinds of this entertainment was always at the ready.
Yeah.
Interesting story.
Yeah. And so you ended up coming to school out here for a little while, right? So there was art school?
That was in 67, 68. And then went back to Houston. This was 68, graduated in high school, and you're either going to be a cowboy or a football star or a musician. And that was the low-hanging fruit. I said, give me that guitar.
That's great.
And I hooked up with some guys that were really talented, and we started the Moving Sidewalks. Of course, at that time, the 13th floor elevators were cracking the code. They were the guys.
Yeah.
And
You're going to miss me and all those stuff that was
yeah.
going on.
Yeah, I said, elevators, they go up. Moving Sidewalks goes forward. All right, we're going to call it the Moving Sidewalks.
Yeah.
Drawing, of course, from 13th floor elevators.
Yeah.
To this day, those influences remain so strident. It's really interesting.
Yeah, they really do. Isn't it amazing how much? Speaking of that, can we talk about those 4 shows that you did with Hendrix and the Experience, and that incredible compliment that he gave you? Can we talk about that? And you're meeting Hendrix and what that experience was like.
Yes, I had a girlfriend. She was living in London. She had decided to go to school overseas, and she wound up in London. She sent me a copy of this record, and it arrived. And she had called in advance. She goes, "Hey," she said, "there's something coming to you in the mail. Don't overlook it. I think you're really going to like it." And sure enough, we unwrapped this thing called the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And I remember putting it on the turntable, and I stared at that turntable throughout side 1, flipped it over, and stared at that turntable throughout side. The second side was, I mean, you couldn't get away from it.
Yeah.
And we had a copy of the record before it hit the States.
Yeah, are you experienced the version that was out in the UK? Yeah.
And so time went on, and Chaz Chandler, of course, he had just left.
The Animals, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bass player for the Animals. And he had taken Hendrix under his wing, and things were starting to percolate. And next thing you know, we had a manager that was overseeing the activities at the Moving Sidewalks, and it was kind of funny. He said, "Hey," he said, "I got a phone call. There's an offer for you guys to play some shows with a group from England." And that in itself was exciting. Oh,
Yeah.
English, yeah, okay. And he said, "We don't know much about it. Have you heard of this Jimi Hendrix guy?" And of course, we knew, and we flipped. I said, "Yeah, we'll take that gig."
Yeah. That's great.
And next thing you know, we're traveling town to town, and those 3 guys. The Hendrix outfit. It was only 6 people.
Yeah.
You had Mitch Mitchell on drums, Noel Redding on bass, Jimmy on guitar and singing, Chaz Chandler and his wife Pidge, and Jerry Stickles and Nigel, the 2 equipment guys. That was it. That was the entire group.
Yeah.
So once our little 4-piece outfit joined up, and then, of course, Wyatt's outfit, the Soft Machine.
Yeah, Robert Wyatt's, yeah.
So it was a very tidy organization, and we all got to be pretty close in a very short amount of time. And Hendrix was really interesting. He was playing a Stratocaster, and at the time I was playing a Stratocaster, and we started comparing notes. And of course, needless to say, Hendrix was doing things with the Stratocaster that I could just about guarantee the inventors of that instrument had no clue what he would be able to wind up doing with that crazy instrument.
Yeah.
And in fact, one fateful night, I remember on every stop, Hendrix insisted having a record player. Well, the record player that was part of the outfit was the size of a sofa. It was a piece of furniture.
One of those giant ones that used to be in people's living rooms, right?
Yeah.
With the big speakers, and the thing would slide over on the top. You'd have the radio thing would be one side, and then the turntable. Those things are giant.
And
furniture.
We'd sit there cross-legged on the floor in front of this piece of furniture, and he was playing. I'll never forget it. He said, "How do you think he's doing this?" I looked over, and he was listening to Jeff Beck, the first Jeff Beck album, Jeff Beck group. And I said, "Jimmy," I said, I'm sure Jeff Beck is listening to your records saying the same thing. How does this guy do this stuff?
Yeah.
But at the time, I remember walking in, and Jimmy had taken the pickguard assembly off one of the Stratocasters, of which Fender had seen to it that on any given day, a truck would show up with 20 or 30 Strats.
Yeah.
Just for Jimmy. He could go through them and take his pick. Well, he had taken the pickguard assembly off, and it was Jimi Hendrix that figured out that the 3-position toggle switch, back position was for the back pickup, middle position was the middle pickup, front position, front pickup. Although, if with some caution, you could find your way to the in-between spot, which was not necessarily designed to do that.
Yeah.
But leave it to Hendrix. He figured it out. The in-between spot ignited the back pickup and the middle pickup out of phase. You inch it a little further toward the front, and it was the middle pickup and the front pickup also out of phase. Now you buy a Stratocaster. It's not a 3-position switch. It's 5.
Yeah.
Thanks to Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's great that he did that. So you guys became good friends on the road, really, and just talked about music a lot and enjoyed those shows. And I know that he was very fond of your guitar playing as well, from what I understand.
Well, it was funny. In order for the Moving Sidewalks to fulfill the contract, playing 40 minutes, we only knew enough songs, which included we had learned how to play Foxy Lady and Purple Haze from that record that our girlfriend had sent us from England.
Yeah.
And it was really quite interesting. We were playing it in front of kids that had yet to hear the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And I'll never forget talking about it backstage. I said, "Gee whiz!" I said, "Do we dare play these two songs?" Well, we gotta play it. We gotta play that long. And I remember looking in the shadows was this figure, and the arms were folded, and the head was kind of nodding. And walking off stage, I felt my guy grabbed me by the shoulders and spun me around. It was Jimi Hendrix, and he was smiling. He said, "I want to get to know you. You got a lot of nerve." I like that.
That's great to do their songs right before they were really out here at that time.
Oh, yeah, crazy.
That's great. I mean, I love that. I love that story. So recently, you wrote the foreword to this new forum show that's being released by Jimmy. And can you tell me about that and about going on Kimmel to perform? That I know is coming up, but when we talk about, because you were at the show at the Forum, so it's not it was something you actually experienced.
Yeah, I remember we parted ways, and it was Mitch Mitchell. He tracked me down. He had called back to Texas, and he had gotten word that I had gone over to Tucson, Arizona. I was hanging out there in Arizona, and I was staying at a hotel, and the front desk guy, he was a music fanatic. He and I were getting along just really good, and it was a young gal, Julie. She was the morning drive traffic girl, but a music fanatic. But they came and grabbed me, and they said, "There's a guy on the phone. Mitch Mitchell wants to talk to you." I said, "Oh, okay," and they were in Detroit. He said, "Hey man, we're going out to California. We got a show at this new building, this new venue called the Forum." And I said, "Okay, I don't know about this place. I should." So I got in a car and drove over, and I was there a couple days getting ready, and I remember Jimi Hendrix. We met in a hotel. He seemed to be a little on edge. And he said, "Yeah, we got a big show coming up." He said, "It's this new venue called the Forum, and we have to follow Eric Clapton's group. I'm a little nervous about it." And I said, "Jimmy," I said, "I'm sure you'll be fine."
Yeah.
And it was funny. Aretha Franklin opened the building. The next act to come through the doors was Cream, and of course Jimmy was. I think they were the third show that graced the Forum.
Yeah.
And it was insane. April 29 of 1969.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And in those days, I was living down off of Sunset Boulevard and just east on Poinsettia, and the whole strip was. It was LA was insane.
Yeah.
Sunset, the 4 lanes of Sunset came 2 lanes.
Yeah.
There was so many people spilling off the sidewalk. They both the north side and the south side became pedestrian.
Yeah.
But man, we went down and was hanging out backstage watching the madness unfold. But I can encourage your listeners will certainly take hearken to the great sound of this unexpected recording from '69. Is every bit, the audio quality is every bit as listenable as what would be recorded today. It's just that great.
That's incredible. I'm so glad they got that. You know, as a kid, I discovered the band with Fandango and Tush, and then, like I said, went back, dig deeper, get the first album, get Tres Hombres, and I want to talk about. I loved the fact that there was a live part of Fandango and the studio side. It was just cool, and I'd never seen anybody else do that at that point in time. And I always wanted to ask you about a song that is on Raw, because this is great for the new record. And it's a song that I've always loved. I heard it on the X, because I knew it was about radio, but I wanted to ask and get the story behind the track.
Oh, yeah. Heard it on the X, and then in an unveiled reference to the famous border blaster XERF. And it goes back to the 20s when commercial radio was unfolding. The United States and Canada very conveniently divided the entire AM wavelength between themselves, leaving nothing for Mexico or Cuba. And at the time, there was a rather illustrious figure named Doc Brinkley. And he was running a radio show out of Kansas, and he was promoting the restoration of sex life for men by performing a goat gland replacement operation. And the medical authorities started taking an interest and didn't much care for the guy.
Yeah, it might freak him out.
So he got run out, and he decided to approach the Mexican authorities at the time. The FCC had been established, and they had put a ceiling of 50,000 watts of broadcasting power. Now, 50,000 watts is pretty strident.
I mean, it goes, especially in AM, because it's like the signals can sail out at night and then go across the country, across borders.
Yeah.
That's the thing that so many people heard things at night with it.
Well, listening to late night radio in Texas, we were listening to Chicago. We got WLAC out of Nashville. Well, Doc Brinkley approached the Mexican authorities, and they were all too willing to let him build a station on just across from Del Rio, Texas, in Villacuña. 50,000 watt ceiling, forget it. 500,000 watts was XERF.
500,000, so 10 times that. That's amazing. What kind of signal that would have at that period of time is incredible. Because, the whole idea of border radio, there's been songs written about it after you heard it on the X, was the first song that was really written about that I'm aware of, that I fell in love with. But, years later, you got Wall of Voodoo doing Mexican radio, and you have, band songs like Border Radio, Blasters, things like that. But I love that. So tell me about this station. So what kind of stuff did they play? Was it R&B? Was it Mexican music? Was it rock and roll?
They lit the fuse at 6 p.m. In the daytime, it was dormant. But at 6 o'clock, on it went. And they decided to break up the broadcasting into 15-minute segments. And you could buy your whatever it was you were pitching. And in fact, it's now suspected that much of the popularity of country music had, in no small part, an origin by broadcasting over XER, XERF back in those days. But it was mainly preachers.
Yeah.
They were selling their prayer cloths. You had Zeke Manor selling piano lessons. You could get 100 baby chicks for $2.50.
So they would buy time, and it was like an advertisement, and they can go on there and do that. And then some people will be about music, right?
Yes. And in the mid-'60s, of course, Wolfman Jack figured it out.
Yeah, he was one of the biggest successes from Border Radio. You know.
Oh man, and that to this day, I think that there's a lot of people can relate to the impact that Wolfman Jack had across those late night hours. I mean, it's been said that on some nights you could pick up XERF in parts of Western Europe, even over to Hawaii. So,
wow, it was that big. And that was the station that he ended up on, right?
Yeah.
Was that true? And there was a story I had heard years later that Wolfman Jack had kind of fallen out. He originally was an investor in it, and then things didn't work out, and he was a period where things were not looking good for him, and he was a bit down on his luck. And, of course, George Lucas asked him to be a part of this little movie called American Graffiti and the soundtrack, and gave him a piece of the soundtrack and the movie for being in it because of how important Border Radio was. And that really turned Wolfman Jack's life around in a big way, because then, he ended up syndicated on radio everywhere in the 70s and on Midnight Special. So he had an incredible career. It just, that was one of those stories that warmed my heart as a radio DJ. Like, we went through some shit and then came through it, again, which was unbelievable.
From the Mexican authorities, they were starting to grant license. There was XEG in Reynosa. And then later, as you point out, Wolfman Jack gravitated to XERB, which was in Rosarita, just across the border. And the rest is history.
Yeah.
It's just great stuff, great sounds. And I was listening to it, and part of ZZ Top's, I think, the fabric that we were drawing from, each thread brought us back to the impact of XERF. Frank was hearing it. Dusty was hearing it. All of us were hearing it. It was cool.
You guys were all listening to it. And like you said, it was country. It was blues, right?
Country,
it was everything.
Jesus, hillbilly, and blues.
So cool. I love that. I love that you turned it into this great full-on rockin' song that it, of course, became through Fandango, which is so great.
The line, we can all thank Dr. B, who stepped across the line with lots of watts. He took control, the first one of its kind.
Yeah.
That was great.
That's what it's about. That's great. I love knowing that story after all these years, which is really incredible. And then, Tres Hombres, of course, was an album that the next album I bought, even if it meant going backwards a little bit there. And so talk to me, can we mention the bourbon that you guys have out too? There's a bourbon that you guys have called Tres Hombres,
yes,
right?
It's hitting the shelves across the country. We were approached by a fledgling distillery in Texas that was being developed and run by some young guys that loved spending time with spirits, and it was driven by their love of music.
Yeah.
And they thought, gee whiz, we got this great tasting whiskey. How do we get it involved in our real passion for music? And you'll be flattered to know that they listen to you incessantly. We've had great discussions of all of the impact and influences that brought us together with this distillery.
Yeah.
And they said, how about we call it ZZ Top's Tres Hombres Whiskey?
Yeah.
I said, well, let's give it a shot. And that was the first crack out of the bottle, no pun intended.
Yeah.
And now they've even gotten adventurous into going into the flavors of a bourbon.
Yeah.
So there's now a ZZ Top whiskey and a ZZ Top bourbon. But quite popular, I must say that they've done a good job. The flavors are intact, and if you got the palate for it, you'll like it.
Yeah, well, I think it's great. And, I want to also ask you about, the Raw tour now that you're getting ready to go out again. And talk to me about Elwood. Elwood, because Charles, I don't, I'd like to know more about his background.
Yeah, Elwood Francis.
Elwood Francis.
Our long-standing guitar technician.
So he was a guitar tech that he ended up because he was so tight with you guys and been with you for years, right? What year did he start with you guys?
32 years ago.
Wow.
From this being 2022.
Yeah.
He goes back 3 decades and was always on the spot. The guy took care of everything guitar related, everything bass guitar related. And it was Dusty's desire when he started feeling out of sorts, and he said, gee whiz, he said, I should probably go down and see the physician. He said, I don't know what's up, but I'm kind of off kilter. And I said, okay. He said, look, depending on when I come back, he said, we got these shows coming up. He said, give my guitar to Elwood. Elwood knows it. He's family. He knows it inside out and backwards. And I said, okay, if that's what you want. And I think the real irony to this coincidental happenstance was the fact that for 30 years, Elwood was on the sidelines, clean-shaven. He had a skateboard under one arm, an avocado sandwich in the other, thinking guitar strings here and guitar that. Well, bring on the year 2020 and 2021. He followed suit. He got lazy and threw the razor away.
Yeah, he got the beard, which is great. So it works perfectly.
And I remember coming in to rehearse, ZZ Top had gotten the cue. The curtain was lifting, and went into rehearsal, and I said, hey, who's the new guy? And they said, well, you're pointing at Elwood. And I said, no, that guy with the big, long beard. They said, that's Elwood.
Yeah.
He had grown a beard long as mine, long as Dusty's.
Yeah, and he was always a bass player for years, and he just knew what to do, right? It was great.
He's a great guitar player. Great bass player.
Yeah.
Blows a mean harmonica.
Plays everything, doesn't he?
Well-rounded cat. So as things unfolded,
he's played all instruments and sings a little too, of course, right? Which is so good, right?
Yeah. He's got a real twisted sense of being on this planet, I should say. It goes way beyond.
Tell me about the history of the 17-string bass, too. We need to talk about that as well, right?
Well, there's a guy who's also has a great sense of humor. He and Elwood have just recently connected, but Jared, some people say Dines, some people say Dines, D-I-N-E-S.
Yeah.
And we should credit him with having concocted the first multi-string bass guitar.
Yeah.
It went from 17 to 18. Rumor has it now 20 and counting. But I saw one advertised on some website. I thought it was either photoshopped or I thought it might have been a cartoon, but it was a couple $100, and I said, "Gee, let's take a chance." Well, 6 months went by, and I thought, well, it must have been a joke. What the heck? Until the mailbox delivery service called up, and they said, "We've got a large package that is quite heavy. You need to come down here and pick it up." And I said, "Gee, I don't think it'll fit in the car. We better open it up." And lo and behold, there was this 17-string bass guitar.
Oh my God!
Just ready for Elwood's shoulder.
Yeah. Can you tell me about that with Elwood playing something like that? I mean, it's pretty huge, right? I mean, how wide is it? How wide is the whole thing?
Well,
the body.
To give you some idea of the expansiveness of this crazy thing, we finally figured out, well, step one was how do you tune it?
Yeah.
We got past that, and I remember coming aboard Elwood's tour bus, and this thing it was laying across from one side of the sofa to the other side of the bus, and they were using it as a dining table.
Yeah.
So it's a good 18 inches wide, the fingerboard. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Wow, that's incredible. You know, another thing, Billy, that's so amazing is just there's only a handful of bands who go through periods in their career where with the longevity that I mean, literally, can make the changes and that you guys did in the '80s when you were doing albums like Eliminator and those incredible records and those amazing hits that came with that. Everything you everybody knows, of course, Sharp Dressed Man, Give Me All Your Love and Legs, all those classics. And MTV was, of course, a big part of really, I mean, you were a godsend and a gift to MTV with your look, with the videos. It was such a really cool and positive thing. Talk to me about that. And you guys were always the good guys. It was like there were no cops chasing you guys. You guys were always the good guys in the videos. But talk to me about that experience for you guys. When you saw how that blew up and people were like, wow, there was a whole another generation that was jumping on and became huge fans of the band. Tell me about that.
MTV was. There's the funny story was Dusty and I received a call from our fearless drummer, the man with no beard, Frank
Beard. Which is, by the way, that's one of the greatest lines in rock history. People always say they're like, and Frank Beard is the guy without the beard. And people, yeah, I mean, you've heard it a million times, but it's still one of the best things to talk about.
Yeah, and so the phone rang and it's Frank, and he said, "Hey," he said, "turn on the TV." This was like 3:00 in the morning. He said, "There's some really interesting music." He said, "I don't know. It looks like an ongoing concert. I've been watching for an hour, and it's still going." And so he picked up. He said, "I'll call Dusty." So the three of us were watching. After 4 hours of nonstop music, I said, "Where is this concert? We should be there." And somebody said, "No, it's this new thing, MTV, Music TV." And that's how we discovered MTV.
Yeah.
The next shoe to drop was getting connected through a guy in our outfit. Sam Taylor said, "There's a guy that really, I think this is going to be the guy that knows what to do with ZZ Top. Nobody else knows what to do with you guys, but Tim Newman was called in, Randy Newman's cousin, and he had done a couple of videos for Randy Newman, and we got together with Tim. And of course, in those days, the record labels were kind of curious, but
yeah, they weren't 100% on board. That's why there were so many British things coming over at that period of time, because
they were afraid to spend any money on this thing. It was like, oh, is this a trend? What is this? But we jumped in it with both feet, and there was Tim Newman. He said, "Look," he said, "I don't really know what to do, but we're going to do it." And he said, "By the way," he said, "I know you've got a fancy red hot rod car. We've seen it on this new record of yours. You call it the Eliminator?" I said, "Yeah, we're calling the record the Eliminator after this car." He said, "Well," he said, "I saw you drove it over to the set. Let's." He said, "It looks good on camera."
Yeah.
And it was things like that, unplanned, unscripted, and it just kind of unfolded.
And it became this thing that was just incredible and a big part of rock and roll history, and certainly the history of MTV as well, which is great. I know that you were a little pressed for time. I want to have you come back, Billy, on again, because I love having you here. There's so much we can talk about. I've always had lots of great questions for you, but I just love talking rock and roll with you and hearing stories, talking blues, everything. I guess the last thing we'll talk about before we leave, and also the Raw tour, of course, we want to talk about that, is tell me about on the Black Keys. They just got a Grammy nomination for Dropout Boogie. The album was recently announced. Can you tell me, you ended up playing on that record?
Yeah, well, you and I have had such an interesting history, and it's touched upon so many different kinds of music. To my delight, I jumped on a flight and my flying partner sitting next to me was none other than your guitar man from the Black Keys. Dan was sitting right there, and I was delighted, and it gave me a chance to remind him of how genius it was. The day that I tiptoed into their recording studio, not realizing that they were in the process of making a new record. I was just curious to see what new crazy guitar had shown up. And he was smiling all the while. He goes, yeah, come on in. He said, I do have something that might strike your fancy. He said, believe it or not. And he pointed up in this rack of mini guitars. And I said, gee, and I was a bit nonplussed in the beginning. It was a cheap Japanese thing that you wouldn't really spend much time writing home about until on close inspection, it had that Dymo label that said Hound Dog Taylor.
Wow.
It was Hound Dog Taylor's guitar.
Whoa.
And he pulled it. I said, man, get it down. And he pulled it down. He said, here, let's plug it in. And he said, Patrick's here. He said, Patrick, give me a beat. And off we go. And we sat there just having a blast. It must have been a good half an hour of just taking it this way, taking it that way. We finally pulled it to the curb, and I said, yeah, man. I said, I better bow out. I folded my tent. And later that day, he said, oh, by the way, he said, you're on the record.
So they were recording the whole time you guys were jamming, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. Yeah, that was something that we've talked about a lot on the air here on the show.
He was quizzing me in the same sense. He had heard about this annual get-together down in Austin. I go down with yet another extension, a group. We go by the name The Jungle Show.
Yeah.
And this will be 10 years running between Christmas and New Year's. It's Jimmy Vaughn on guitar, Mike Flanagan takes keyboards, Sue Foley on guitar.
Yeah.
Stevie Ray's drummer, Chris Layton.
Yeah.
And it's a great deal. And he said, yeah, I'm coming through Austin. And I said, well, guess what? We will have the tape rolling, and we ain't going to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way to do it. That's a great story. I love that. I love that you go down there and do that with Jimmy and those guys. I just want to say, so the Raw Tour is coming up, right? In the new year, you're going to do some more shows?
Yes. The wheels are rolling, and I got to credit Elwood for stepping in with he did not shave.
Yeah.
And I was leaving the building the other day, and I heard a couple of kids were leaving, and the guy said, gee whiz, that new bass player, that guy Elwood, man, what a player. Maybe they ought to give him a hat, maybe fit him in the cowboy theme. And the girl said, get him a hat. That guy needs a brush.
That's great. That's awesome.
So we got the wild man up there. So yeah, the touring continues to unfold. It's a wonderful thing.
I think it's a great thing, and I think I love the story that you share with us about Dusty really wanting to see Elwood in that place and to continue as he would want you to do. And I think that's what's so great about it. You know what I mean? Stayed in the family, which is cool.
Yeah,
you know?
Man. He used he said, the show must go on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. So I want to thank you so much for coming by, Billy. It's great to have you.
Mr. Matt, this is a pleasure.
Yeah, such a good time with you today, you know. Hardwire's last solo record, if you haven't checked that out yet, I want to tell everybody to check out that Billy F. Gibbons. Last album you did with Matt Sorum and a bunch of the guys, which is really got some great songs on it. And you got to get raw. If you're a ZZ Top fan, you have to pick the album up. It's got killer versions of all those songs. So thanks so much for coming by and hanging out with us. It's Billy Gibbons, everybody. I'm Matt Pinfield. This is New and Approved, our 100th episode. It's almost 2 years now that we've been here together doing this show, and I'm really excited that I could share my 100th episode with the great Billy Gibbons today. What a great guest to have. Put me in the best mood, that's all I can tell you. And thanks for everybody who's been watching and listening to the show for the last 2 years. All right, thank you. I'll be back with you soon. I'm Matt Pinfield. This is New and Approved. Thanks for watching and listening.